Good morning, everyone. Fantastic day to our grade 5 science teachers of SDO Isabela. I am your guru for this session. I'm Ardashir Eschoko from Alicia North District. And this time, I will walk you through the utilization of STEM approach in the new normal. So on this approach, I am very sure that you are now well aware of its four key components. We have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Hence, it is called STEM. And now, we are down to its utilization with regards to teaching science. So our first stop will be the background information for learners, or the BIL. Now, this is very important because we will no longer be having the discussions as we normally do inside the classroom. So the purpose of this is for concept inputs. So this will provide a range of information to the learners as they go along with the lesson. So the science concepts should be presented in this part of the class, and that it will be reinforced through the learning activities catered in the material. But how are we going to deliver this to our learners, especially in this kind of setup that we have? Well, there are different modalities. First, we have the modular distance learning. Now, in this modality, the learners can choose either the printed materials or can be the digital materials. Actually, the content of the printed material is exactly the same with that of the file saved in the flash drive. The learners can use the digital if they have available gadgets at home, but they do not have internet access or connection to the internet. While those who prefer the printed one, they can directly answer the activities in the learning activity sheet. And these materials will be handed to them, to the learners, and it will be retrieved by the knowledge bearer. And the second modality that we can employ is the online distance learning. Now, by seeing the illustration, there you have the illustration, you can tell right away the difference between synchronous and asynchronous type of learning. And one of the trends in this type of learning is actually the use of Google Classroom. Okay, so speaking of Google Classroom, I just want to share a bit of information on how to create one, because you will be using this for online classes. Now, when you log into your Gmail account, you just have to click the tab or icon, and then a classroom icon or logo will appear. Then click create class. Okay, there you have it. Click create class, and you have your own Google Classroom already. Now you may upload now the BIL using the options in the classwork, and of course you may have to invite or add your learners using their email. Then you can notify them that they have something to do or something to read through the conversation box. Okay, so the learning competency or the objective of this lesson is to describe the motion of an object by tracing and measuring its change in position or the distance traveled over a period of time. So this is taken from the most essential learning competencies or the MELCs with the learning code below. So this will be on the first week of the third quarter. So this is what I am going to deliver in the different modalities using the STEM approach. because this type of lesson, which involves blueprint making, what else, measuring, creating, constructing, data recording, and making graph, are best taught using the STEM approach. But definitely, this approach can't be used in every lesson. So with other strategies or approaches. Okay, so this time, my dear participants, please get the copy of your learning activity sheet as we take a look at the first activity. And this is called the transporter. So in the example, okay, so you can see a boy playing a marble. So what the learners have to do is to examine the picture, to identify the reference point, and measure the distance traveled by the marble. So clearly, this involves tracing and measuring the distance traveled by the object. So with this, we can say that the activity is aligned to our competency. Moreover, the activity is evidently mathematics in nature. Okay, so that is just one example. The other activities similar to this will be performed by the learners. But how can we have this part of the LAS through online? Well, we can send it via Messenger in the group chat or GC, or again, we can resort to Google Classroom. Okay, so I have introduced you earlier to the classwork feature of the Google Classroom. We can upload the activities to our classwork by creating a class drive folder. Just right-click on the created class drive folder, then an upload option will appear. Then select the file to be uploaded from your computer. Okay, and then the file can be downloaded now by the learners. Then similarly, they can also upload it after they are done. So we are now in the engage part of the lesson. And since STEM approach is rooted from a problem or a situation that encourages problem solving, I prepared a situation as a springboard to the succeeding activity. So you can check that in the LAS that you are holding if you have printed one. And again, there is no problem if the learners would prefer the printed LAS or printed material, because they can directly put their answer into it and proceed with the activity. But for the online, you can drop this to the classwork at the assignment section. There you can see on the screen. Okay, so this activity is called Force Be With You, and this activity is in response to the problem that I have mentioned earlier. And these are the procedures or the instructions for the learners. First, they need to collect household recyclable materials as a response to the problem presented earlier. Second, okay, they need to plan, to design, and create their own gravity vehicle ramp model and toy car model from the materials that they have collected. So this is now the engineering phase of STEM approach. So they are required to make a blueprint of their output before finally building the structure. And number 3, using their journal entry, they're going to label and describe the purpose of each part of the structure, and they are recommended to use educational technology as their search engine. And now, they can construct a ramp and toy car models using recyclable materials. So after having the blueprint, they are now ready to go for the building phase of this approach. So let us be reminded, or let us remember, that any product created or constructed by the learners through the application of science concept is regarded as technology. So we have now the insertion of technology in this part of the lesson. Now, how are we going to check the outputs? Okay, maybe they can photograph their output and send it through Messenger. Okay, so this time, let's have a glimpse of what they can possibly do during the technology and engineering phase of STEM approach through the learner's journal entry. So this is the journal entry for the vehicle ramp model. Okay, so that is the blueprint. Those are the parts, and below is the actual ramp. Okay, but I think it's a bit wide. And then you can have the toy car model. I am sure that this will be fun for the learners, especially the boys. So we develop fun in learning in doing this activity. So we have the blueprint and its parts, and then we have the final output. So this is an example of a journal entry. Okay, now since this is a performance task or performance-based activity or output-based activity, we need to prepare the scoring rubrics. So we all know what is this for. The purpose of this is to, of course, maintain an objective and fair type of scoring pupils' output. So I have prepared 3 standards for scoring. We have 1, structurally sound, 2, creativity, and 3, parts of the structure. And for the scoring system, we have 3 as the highest and 1 as the lowest. Now, for the full information about the rubrics, you can refer to your copy. So we are now in the exploration part of the lesson. It is where the learners will be performing the procedure of the second activity in the learning activity sheet. Now we can actually facilitate this lesson through asynchronous distance learning. This is under the online distance learning, and this can be done by uploading the activity sheet in the Google Classroom, or this is through the classwork, and then the learners would go online to study the materials and then perform the activity given by the teacher. And then the accomplishment and the submission of these requirements or the result of the activity will be based on their schedule. So now let us see how the activity will work through this video demonstration. Okay, so this time I am going to demonstrate the procedure of the second learning activity in the class. And for this activity, we will be needing these materials. So first, we have the toy car model, and we also have the gravity vehicle ramp model. So these are the ones that the learners have created in the early part of the lesson. And now we are going to use them for this activity. Okay, and we will also be using at least 3 blocks. And we also have a stopwatch for this activity. And of course, a ruler. Now that we have all the needed materials, I think we are now ready to perform the activity. So let's see the first procedure. Okay, so for the first procedure, we are going to, or the learners are going to position the ramp on a block. Put a red mark or a mark on the ramp which will serve as the reference point. Okay, so actually I have already put a mark on the ramp that would serve as the reference point. And this will be the setup. Okay, so as illustrated on the screen. And second, release the toy car on the ramp and measure in centimeters the distance covered by the toy car. Okay, so we also have to take note of the time. So we will be needing the stopwatch. Okay, so we just have to release the toy car and let it accelerate on the ramp. Okay, so I think we are ready. And okay, now for this, we are going to measure or to trace the distance traveled by the toy car. And the toy car travels in 10 centimeters within 1.43 seconds. Okay. That is our first and second procedure. Now let's see the third procedure. Repeat steps 1 and 2 for trial 2, but add a little push as you release the toy car. Okay, so this will be the second trial. So we will be using a single black steel, but this time we are going to release the toy car with an extra push. And you also have to take note of the time. Okay, so simply as that. And then we are going to measure the distance traveled by the toy car. And that is for the second trial in the first setup steel. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth procedure. Put another block on top of the first block and repeat steps 1, 2, 3. So this is now the second setup because we are going to add another block on top of the first block. And let's position the ramp. So now, for the first trial of the second setup, let's just put the toy car on the ramp and let it accelerate down the ramp. Okay, but of course, we need to record the time and afterwards measure the distance it traveled. So that is now for the first trial on the second setup. This time we have to perform the second trial, and that is to add an additional push or extra push to the toy car. So let's see. Okay, and the same as usual, record the time and trace and measure the distance it traveled. Okay, so now we are ready to perform the last procedure. Okay, so for the last procedure, we are going to add or put another block on top of the two blocks, then repeat steps 1, 2, 3. So this will be now the third setup or setup C, because we are going to add another blocks on top of the two and place the vehicle ramp model. And then for the first trial, we just have to release the toy car and we have to take note of the time and measure the distance it traveled. And finally, for the second trial of the third setup, we have to put an extra push to to the toy car as it travels down the vehicle ramp. And the same as we have did on the first and second setup, we are going to record the time and trace and measure the distance it traveled. Okay, so clearly this is now the mathematics phase of the STEM approach. Why? Because we let the students to measure the distance the toy car have or has traveled. And if we are going to recall the competency to be taught, it says that it is to describe the motion of an object by tracing and measuring its change in position or its distance traveled. So clearly, we are in the right track in the mastery of the competency, because we can see the alignment of the activity and the skills to be developed. Okay, so that's it for our second activity, and we will be or the children rather, or the learners are going to perform more of the activities as incorporated in the learning activity sheet. Okay, so after performing the activity, the learners have to record the result of the activity. So in the table, in the first column, we have the number of blocks in each setup. So one block for setup A, 2 blocks for setup B, and 3 blocks for setup C. Then we also need to record the time traveled by the toy car and its distance traveled in trial 1 and 2. So this is still part of the mathematics phase of the STEM approach, because it involves recording of data, especially that these are numerical data. Okay, so the activity is becoming challenging as the learners come to graph the data that they have recorded in the past activity. That is why in the learning activity sheet that I have prepared, as you can see, if you have already the copy, I pasted a graphing paper for this activity. So for the sake of this presentation, I have assumed some data for projection purposes. Okay, so there you can see at the bottom part of the graph the coded setups. So yellow-green for setup A, green for setup B, and yellow for setup C. The two connecting points represent the two trials. Okay, like for example, in setup A, in trial 1, we have 20 centimeters traveled, distance traveled by the car, and then 28 in the second trial. Sa second setup, we have 32 centimeter in the first trial, and then we have 40 centimeters for the second trial. And on the third setup, we have 47 centimeters for the first trial, and then we have 57 centimeters for the second trial. Okay, so for this activity, we need to have another scoring rubrics. So we have same scoring points, 3 as the highest and 1 as the lowest. But this time, we have 5, or I have prepared 5 standards. We have the title, the labels, the intervals, the neatness, and the information. Now, for the full information that can be seen on the rubrics, please refer to your copy if you have printed your copies already. Okay, now to sum up all the things that the learners have learned from the learning activity sheet, we have now the reflective activity. So they are going to make their own reflections based from their experiences from the learning activity sheet. So they may answer these questions. For number 1, what they have learned from the lesson, and what are the things that they enjoyed most about the lesson, and what are the things they wanted to learn more about the lesson. So this is now the reflective activity for the learners. Okay, and that would be my last slide. Thank you very much for listening, grade 5 science teachers of SDO Isabela. I hope I have shared something relevant to all of you, which can be useful as we start this school year in an unusual way. And before I go, I want to say, stay positive in life in spite of the pandemic, but stay negative for COVID. Thank you and good day.